Hello, and welcome to Ideas That Happen, a series where we spotlight the very best ideas, initiatives, and pilots building a healthier and greener future. This episode is brought to you by Bax & Company, a leading sustainable innovation agency in Europe. I'm Caitlin Ball, and I'm a communications specialist in climate, health, and digital innovation. Today's episode, we're looking at health in cities and a new tool that's putting health at the heart of urban planning, the Healthy Cities Generator. I'm here today with Amber de la Haye and Ruth Gao from Healthy Cities. Let's start off with a quick round of introductions. Amber?
Thank you, Caitlin. Yep, my name's Amber, and I have been working at the Healthy Cities team for 2.5 years now. And for the Healthy Cities Generator, I lead on research and product management.
Great, thanks. And Ruth?
Thanks, Caitlin. So yeah, I'm Ruth. I've been now working with the Healthy Cities team for just over a year. I'm an architect and urban planner, so I really focus on implementing all this research that Amber was just mentioning and applying it to real life
What's
cases.
so important to you about this kind of work? Why do you care so much about making sure that our cities are healthy?
Well, I think there's a common misconception that health means hospitals, when really health is a holistic thing that's driven in so many different ways. Health is something that's fostered not just with your doctor or with your medicine, but also with your lifestyle, with your environment, with everything around you all of the time affects your health. Whether that's the street you live on, the way you get to work, whether you walk or cycle or walk through traffic, or whether you drive to work, all of these factors affect your health, and all of these factors can be changed and influenced by the environment around you.
It's very true. Thanks, Amber.
Ruth, why did you decide to become an architect and focus particularly on healthy urban planning?
I think initially I was drawn to architecture because it brought a lot of things that I was interested in together. So it has this kind of more, definitely quite a big technical base, but then it has this other creative side, which I really like, having these sort of two aspects together in my work. And I think now in urban planning, that's more true than ever. So we have a lot of technical work with specific urban plans, but then also with the work we do here at Healthy Cities, we have more creative assignments, also thinking about health in this more holistic way and how we can use this also as a way to communicate better about urban planning, the work we do, the changes that we do in our cities.
Yep. Nice. Thanks both for sharing. All right, so before we dive in a bit to the Healthy Cities Generator, I'd like to ask for a little bit of context around sort of healthy planning tools in general. What role do they play in urban design? And before you started building the Healthy Cities Generator, what kinds of tools were already out there that made you feel like we had to create a new one?
Yeah, I think as a planner, it's definitely very important to have these tools and these resources out there. Because as a planner, your job is to really gather all these inputs from different topics, from different realms. So we have mobility, we have greening aspects, housing, a whole range of things that we have to take into account and distill into one specific project. And of course, as urban planners, we are not expert in all of these fields. We really rely on working close by with our colleagues in these topics, but also having tools is a great way of kind of guiding our work and our work with these topics.
Yeah, and I understand, Amber, since you are sort of leading the research at the beginning of this tool and building this tool, what kind of research did you do, and what did this research reveal about the tools that were already out there?
Yeah, before we started building the tool, we wanted to see what was out there to make sure that what we wanted to create actually filled a real need and fulfilled a gap in the market. So we did an initial scoping review into the existing tools, and then followed that up with a systematic literature review and a systematic evaluation of existing healthy planning frameworks. And we found that there are a lot of frameworks and guidance and tools out there. I'd say probably at least 100, but they tend to be not very holistic. So often there will be a tool that focuses on just one element of urbanism that is linked with health. So a tool very much focused on mobility, focusing on how you can improve cycling, or focused on how you can improve the green spaces in your city, or focused on quite a lot of tools in the mobility section, actually. That's probably the most common area for there to be guidance frameworks and tools. But there weren't so many that covered all of these different areas of urban planning that we know affect health. And where there were, we found them to be extremely data intensive. They require gathering a lot of data, questionnaires, sometimes several day-long processes. That's not very accessible for your average person and requires a lot of resources to implement. On the other hand, we also found that there's very little provision out there that is focused on the specific health impacts of urban planning. So whilst a lot of tools will be focused on the general outcome of urban planning in terms of health, so let's say you improve cycling access and provision, that leads to a general improvement in health. There isn't really anything that's focused on the specificities of health outcomes, such as cardiovascular health, depression, going into these kind of individual health outcomes that can be affected by urban planning. We also found that there wasn't really anything or very few tools focused on this actual planning stage where you maybe have your plans and you want to analyze your plans outside of highly complex modeling and calculation tools. Generally, they're more at the policy level, decision making level to kind of guide your ideas rather than to specifically analyze a concrete plan that you have.
All right. Thanks so much for sharing. It sounds like, putting together a tool that's both detailed but also holistic is important, but also a little bit of a challenge. So could you tell us a little bit more about the process of building this tool? I know you mentioned something about the state-of-the-art research, the literature review, expert consulting maybe.
Yeah, so we really wanted the tool to be research-driven. It had to stem from the scientific literature. So we started with a systematic review of the literature from 2015. I don't know. Is it 2015? Yeah. So we started from a scientific review of the literature from 2015 to 2021. And with this literature review, we looked at all of the studies that showed a link between urban planning determinants or the elements of urban planning that are changeable, amenable to change, and then the health outcomes that were linked to that. Doing this research, we then condensed and organized the results and found that they related to around 20 different urban planning determinants, which were shown to be linked to around 30 different health outcomes. So those urban planning determinants fell into the categories of density, ensuring that you have a compact city, mobility, ensuring that your city is well connected and easy to get around, that you have a green city, that you have variety of many different services and recreation and as well as commercial opportunities available for people close to their homes. And then finally, housing. And so we broadly categorized the urban determinants we found into these, and they were linked to around 30 different health outcomes. And that's related to the environment, physical health, mental health, general well-being, and lifestyle changes such as diet and exercise and sedentary behavior. So this was really the original research that drives the tool. But then, as we were discussing before, we did reviews into the existing tools out there to make sure that we were creating something that was usable and would be designed in a way that meets what people need. So that's something that's highly easy to use, something that can be used with non-experts, something that's visual and interactive and online. And we also consulted with groups of experts. We have an expert advisory board who we've brought together a number of times to feed into the design of the algorithm that takes this data on the urban determinants and the health outcomes and gives a score. And that score is a combination of how holistic your effects are and how high impact your effects are you're having with your plan, as well as feeding into the design of the tool and how usable and whether it is the right kind of design for them.
Yeah. So Ruth, could you tell me a little bit more about who this tool is designed for beyond planning professionals? Citizens, maybe politicians?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think it's really important that we also take these kind of tools and resources past the more technical planning process onto the people that are actually making these decisions. So we really need to have health, as Amber was saying. So we tried to think of a tool that would be useful at many stages throughout the planning process. So not only when we have quite a well-defined plan for a certain area where the urban planners and the health professionals could come in, but also at the earlier stages when people are actually making the decisions about which things should be prioritized, which areas we should work with. And here also it's really important to have health in mind. And I think it's also a really useful way of backing these decisions and communicating about them to the general public as well.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. All right, so, okay. Very cool to know a little bit more about how other groups can use this tool beyond just urban planning professionals. So you can see we set up a little laptop for you so that we could do a bit of a demonstration using the tool. But before we dive in, actually, I was going to ask if you could share a little bit about the case study that we'll be using today. I understand it's a project that you did for the Provincial Council of Barcelona.
Yeah, so we did this project. It's called La Industrial Suma. So the starting point is this. It used to be an industrial area back in the 19th century. And now it's occupied by, as you were saying, the Provincial Council of Barcelona. So they own most of this area. They have some offices, and then they have buildings that are used for other purposes. So there's a university, halls of residence, but it's quite unconnected at the moment, and sort of each one is doing their own thing, but they don't really have this concept of like a campus, let's say. So this is their initial idea. So they want to transform this area and also try and make it a bit more open towards the people that live around about it, because it's in the Eixample district in Barcelona. This is one of the most densely populated areas in Barcelona. And one of the main issues they have, apart from really high levels of traffic, is the lack of green spaces. So already initially, before we were involved in the project, the Provincial Council had this idea. That they had this space in the centre of Barcelona and they wanted to repurpose it for certain internal uses, but they also wanted to give something to the community around them. So green space, for example, which in this case is much in need, was sort of their starting point. How can they make this space greener and more open to the surrounding area? And when we started the assignment, we looked into, first of all, the health or the state of health currently for the population that lives in this area. We have a lot of data from here in Catalonia on different health indicators for different sectors of the population. And what we found was that some of the ones that were really in need of prioritizing were all these health, more environmental health indicators. So we had really high levels of noise. In fact, I think 45% of the population in this area is exposed to levels of noise that are above the recommended values at night time, compared to 22% across the whole of Barcelona. So really we see that this area is in not a great state in terms of this indicator, but then again, we also had really high levels of air pollution, a lack of biodiversity. The heat island effect also is much worse here than other areas in the city. And in terms of more physical health, of course, cardiovascular diseases, as in many urban places, was sort of one of the highest factors behind mortality. And then also general mental health issues were sort of came up as something that should be focused on. So yeah, this was the initial phase, and then should I explain a bit more? Or?
No, it's all down. Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting starting point for this assignment. And with the tool, maybe you can demonstrate a little bit how you approached this project and making your recommendations for how to make the space greener and achieve the council's goals.
Okay. So this is the Healthy Cities generator. As you can see, we have two very clear options when we first arrive at the tool. So we have the health option and the planning entry point. So as I was saying before, when we started working on La Industrial, our first step was to focus on these health goals. So to do that, as I said, we went through all this data that we had to identify exactly which health indicators we should be focusing on when doing the assessment and thinking of how this plan could benefit the population. So what we found was that in terms of environmental health, really all three indicators were priority issues because, as I said, we were in a very dense area in the centre of Barcelona, really high levels of traffic, so air pollution and noise pollution were sort of key indicators to address, but also biodiversity due to the lack of green spaces. Another thing we found was this very high rate of cardiovascular diseases and heat stress as well, linked to this lack of sort of green spaces. In terms of mental health, a number of indicators came up which are included here under the general mental health. And attention deficit was another issue within mental health which we decided should be prioritised. So with these inputs from the health side, what the tool shows us here on the right side of the screen is, well, first of all, this list of the 20 urban determinants of health. So these are the different aspects that, as Amber was explaining, we found to have a link to specific health outcomes. And what we see here is to which extent each one of these urban determinants is related to the health indicators that we have chosen. So in our case, with these 7 priority indicators, we can see that really quite a number of urban determinants of health come up as linked to them, but especially relevant are these ones within the environment and urban landscape category. So greening, the green coverage and the access as well to public and green spaces from the residential areas are sort of two of the highest, two of the urban determinants that are linked to most of the health indicators that we have chosen. Greening, in fact, is linked to all of them, so we can really see here that this is a priority. So anything that we are planning in this area should really put this green aspect at the centre. So with this information, we then moved on to the plan itself. And when we joined the project, the provincial council already had some ideas of what they wanted to do in their project, what they wanted to change. And working with them, we defined two actions, that sort of synthesized a bit their planned interventions for the area. And we divided these into 2 different actions. So one was focusing on the open spaces, so renaturalizing these open spaces, making them more accessible to the people that live nearby. Also creating these new pedestrian connections, new squares and places to rest. Again, incorporating all many more green areas, also water features, making the ground more permeable. So all things that are very important for achieving these more natural spaces within cities and especially dense areas such as this one. So with this first action, what we then did is move on and assess the impact that it would have on each one of these 20 urban determinants of health. So some of them, of course, weren't relevant for us in this case, such as population density, as this is something that is outside of the project scope. So we can actually deactivate these urban determinants that aren't relevant to our project. And then for the ones that are, for example, street connectivity, as I said, one of the plans that they had, or one of the ideas that they had, was opening up this area to also use it as a way to connect the streets and make this space more walkable. So in this case, so street connectivity, we rated at a medium impact. So the action will have a medium impact on increasing the street connectivity and intersection density of the area. And when we carry out these assessments and define the impact that each action will have on each one of the urban determinants of health, what we're looking at and what guides our assessment are these criteria that are included within the tool. So these, again, come from the review of other tools and frameworks that were already out there, So yeah, these are all based on the research that was conducted and is the basis of the whole tool. So we would then go on and rate each one of these. For example, in terms of greening, here we have a high impact, because as I was saying, one of the core missions or goals of this working with the open spaces of the area was to increase the green coverage of the area with different types of greening. So not only trees, but also incorporating more green, lower green areas like hedges, and linking these as well, not to places that people will rest, places that people will play in. Another action that the second action that we included in our assessment was how the plan would introduce new uses in the built environment. So again, apart from focusing on how they would make the open areas much more accessible and green, they were also working with the buildings that already existed and trying to repurpose these old industrial buildings that many of them are now sitting empty for new activities focused on research and innovation. So these buildings were going to be refurbished to high energy efficiency standards. They were also going to incorporate green elements on the facades and the roofs and include photovoltaic panels for energy generation. So really, although the actions may seem simple, so one focusing on the built environment and one on the open spaces, they really do have a lot more to them. So within each action, we already see quite a few things that go beyond just introducing these new uses in buildings that are already there, but also try and transform these buildings, not only in terms of how they will be used, but on how they can also contribute to this greener and more sustainable environment around them. So in this case, I can show you, or we can together assess the impact for this specific action. So the plan was also to, within these old buildings, include new uses. So these would be focusing on research and innovation activity. So in this case, we established that it would have a medium impact on increasing business densities. This would also bring other activities to the area. Another urban determinant that would be impacted from the result of this action would be the proximity to recreational and commercial areas. So again, this is linked to the previous one. Also, by increasing density, another thing we can achieve is also increasing the proximity to the people that live nearby to these sorts of facilities. So again, here we would have a medium impact. And then in terms of greening, as I said, some of the plans were to include these, plants on buildings themselves, so on the roofs or on the facade. And again, this is one of the criteria we have within the tool. So when we're thinking about greening, we try and include all these different ideas or sort of criteria that can also be useful for the planner to think about things that maybe they haven't included in their plan to begin with. But of course, these sort of things you can always include at a later stage. So here we established a low impact due to this the incorporation of green elements on the buildings themselves. In terms of urban landscape, we would also have a low impact. So here we understand the urban landscapes in different terms. So it refers to the aesthetics, but also the maintenance, the lighting, these sort of things that are all linked to the spaces where we live in the urban environment. And again, this action focuses mainly on the built environment, but of course this has some impact on the space, the public space round about them. So improving safety or the perception of safety of people that are walking there, and so on. And then lastly, we have this, the last urban determinant would be for improving the energy efficiency of the built environment in general. And here again, we see that we can achieve a medium impact in this case. So already on this page, we get some idea of how this action will impact both the urban determinants and the health indicators. So in the spider diagram, we can get an idea of on which themes, no, or which topics within these urban determinants this specific action is having a greatest impact on. So in this case, we see it's mainly focusing on improving certain aspects related to mobility, and again, on having quite a high impact in aspects that are more related to the green and urban landscape. Again, we already have a sort of general overview of the health impact that's associated to each action. So in this case, we see physical health will be one of the health categories that has the highest impact. But again, this is also and then if we move on to the final results, we can see the combined impact that can be expected from all the actions that we have included in our plan. So again, we see sort of how balanced the plan is in terms of the different topics or the different urban aspects that it focuses on. Here, for example, we see, there's maybe a lack in certain aspects related to, population density, which, as we said, was outside the scope of this plan. But in terms of mixed uses or facilities that are available in the area, maybe here is something that could be prioritized further and improved in the plan moving forward. And then the health indicators, here we have them grouped. So in these broad 5 health categories that we have, which are environmental health, physical, mental well-being, and lifestyle. And then by clicking on each one, we can have a much more detailed view into the specific health indicators and the impact that can be expected on each one. So here we have the 3 environmental health indicators. So as we saw to begin with, these were 3 of our priority health indicators, because we knew that the levels for these were really in need of improving in the area. And then we also have the same for physical health. So again, for example, cardiovascular diseases, which was one of our priorities to start with, we can see to what degree the plan will impact this in relation to other health outcomes. And we have the same for all different categories.
Nice. Out of curiosity, with this tool, at the end you get these visuals that show you what the impacts will be of the proposed plan. Do you also run a baseline at the beginning about how the status of the current space is now, so that you can sort of compare and contrast to see what the space is currently lacking in a visual sense, and then what this new project would bring in also in a visual sense, and compare them side?
Yes, of course. In fact, we have done this. We didn't do this in this specific case, but we have done this in other projects that we were involved in. And it is true that the tool is very much focused on working with a plan. So the way we phrase everything is aimed at people that have a specific plan that will change a certain area. But again, the criteria that are included in it are really applicable or are useful for both situations. So we can use these criteria as a lens to assess the current state of a neighbourhood and see if it's lacking in certain aspects, in the same way that we then apply it to a plan and see which ones are expected to have a higher or lower impact from the plan.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing this stuff out. Yeah, exciting to see how it all comes together in a visual sense.
Yeah, so now that you've launched this newest version of the tool, Amber, what is the future of the Healthy Cities Generator, and what do you have planned next?
Well, at the moment, as you can see from the demonstration, we cover a lot of health outputs and urban determinants as well. But we do see more scope for widening and deepening the areas we address. For example, we would love to perhaps create a spin-off module about mobility. There's so many more factors relating to mobility. We could go into more detail on this, and we'd love to add more urban determinants related to mobility. The same for greening. We'd also really like to add 2 new lenses to the tool. The first would be equality and the social impacts relating to health as well. So we'd like to look at, for example, safety and gender equality, and how these are related to the urban determinants of health within cities, because of course different urban determinants affect different groups of people differently, which I think is a really crucial element to add to the tool going forward. And we also have the ambition of adding financial analysis to the tool. So it would be great one day to be able to weigh up the savings you get from making these different decisions in your urban environment. The savings for health are very significant. So to be able to add that to the tool would also be really useful for guiding decision making and using the tool for advocacy as well. So yeah, we have lots of plans to widen the scope and add new elements to the tool as we go forward.
Very interesting. For anyone in the audience who's curious to find out a little bit more about your work, how can they find you? How can they get in touch with you?
You can go to the healthycitiesgenerator.com website, which has the tool. Anyone can try it. It's freely available to have a demo. And you can also find their contact details for me and Ruth and the other members of our team. So we're very happy to have a call and walk you through it in more detail.
Great. We'll be sure to include those details in the episode description. Thank you both so much for joining us for this episode. And thank you for watching. We look forward to welcoming you back next time for more Ideas That Happen.